Rent to rent effectively is when you rent a property from a landlord, so you don't have to buy it. You're renting it. You rent it either as like a corporate or professional let. So
how many years do you usually put on a contract? Is it only 1 year or 4, 5?
There's different models. Most people, they're generally longer term contracts, and the reason being is you invest in the property somewhat at the beginning, so you need to be able to recuperate that investment. So generally, it's like 3 to 5 years.
Because Farid, when I was training Farid before, he was like, he rents properties on average of 5 years, and I was just like, I was thinking why, but now you said that, it makes sense.
So effectively, imagine you went to go and see a property, and let's say we took an area that we know like Croydon, where a typical 3-bedroom, 2 reception room house is maybe £1,500 a month. You could go and rent that property from the landlord. You could then turn that property into a HMO, so like a house of multiple occupancy, so multiple rooms. So have 5 rooms with each of the reception rooms as a room, and maybe rent each of those rooms out for £600. That gives you a gross rent of £3,000. By the time you pay your bills, maybe £100 per room for bills. That means that's £2,500. So your net profit on that property is £1,000 a month. Now, obviously, there's things to take into account, like the property being empty, which is voids and repairs, depending on what you've got worked out with the landlord, and also an initial setup cost to make sure it's a compliant HMO. But once you've paid all that back, you could potentially be making £1,000 a month. Now, most people that go out and buy a property, say you buy it with a 25% deposit, you were to buy that same house, you're having to put in maybe £100,000, and by the time you take out your mortgage versus the rental income, you might only be making £700, £800 or £500, for example. So effectively, it's a really good way to get into property from a cash flow perspective, and not have the high barriers to entry of capital as well.
So you probably need to, let's say like something like that, you probably need to get with between 5 to 10k.
Yeah, something like that can get you started. I think what you need to bear in mind is it's almost like an investment strategy though. So when you're doing it, let's say to set up that property costs you that 5k, and you're making £1,000 a month. That means you make that money back after 5 months, but really then that means you can only go and get another property after another 5 months when you've got that. So maybe after 10 months. So in terms of your life cycle of how long, depending on how much money you've got at the beginning, will depend on how quickly you could grow that business model.
Someone, let's say, like had like 15 to 20 years, started with like 4 properties.
You start with 4, every year take on another 4 and go from there.
Or even they might be able to do it faster, because like remember you said 5k within 5 months if they were making that same rate,
and then they start making that back, and after you've got the first 4, if they were all really great properties or making you £1,000 a month, after you've got that first 4, that's £4,000 a month profit. If you're saying I don't need a salary at this point, I want to plumb that into the business, you can then start taking on 1 a month and do loads. So and it just depends.
At the end of the year you could probably end up with like 15.
I mean, it just depends on how it goes. I think that the downside, not the downside, but the difficult side of that market is actually the pitch. It's because it's got lower barriers to entry. It's a much more competitive market because it's a lot easier to raise the £5,000 than it is to raise the 50 or 100. So if there's loads of people doing it, naturally there's loads of people you're competing against. When you're picking up that phone to the agent saying, I want to rent a property on a corporate let for 5 years, you got 10 other people making that same phone call. So like might push the price up a little bit, might make it harder to secure those properties. But if you've got a good pitch, if you're confident, if you're good at sales, it's definitely something where people can excel in.
Then from rent to rent, what do you progress to?
So it depends on, like when people tell me like, guys, like I want to get into property, like my first question is why? Because if you don't know your why, it's difficult to really kind of find a focus. So are you looking to, like, if you've got a certain amount of capital, are you looking to grow that? So you're looking at capital appreciation, or are you saying, you know what I want is an easy life, so I want like income, which like in the property space we'd call like, we'd quantify it by the yield on like the return on your rentals. So firstly I'd say like, what are you looking at? Because if you're looking at income, probably buy to lets is a good way to start. You could go from buy to lets, or they could be sort of HMO buy to lets, where you get a higher rate of return, but you've got slightly more risk and slightly more work because you've got more tenants within the one property.
Okay. So now fast forward to 2021. During the lockdown, did you have any rent-to-rent properties?
So I did. I actually had saying this, my big PT's not even talking me through my exercise. No, I'm not a gym goer.
No, I'm gonna show you.
Well, what am I doing here?
So basically, chest up,
what's this?
a bit higher.
A bit higher, yeah.
A bit higher up.
Yeah.
Grab the dumbbell.
Yeah.
So you're gonna start off with your arms forward that way.
Like this.
then you're gonna roll upwards and twist upwards.
Nice.
Right there. Good. Give me 10 of those.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, rent to rent wise,
Yeah.
I did have a rent to rent business.
Yeah.
That I was a co-founder of, started in 2015.
Yeah.
As of the end of 2020, I actually sold my shares in the business.
Yeah.
It was a hard time for rent to rent.
Yeah.
Typically because, you know, in a pandemic,
Yeah.
people are not naturally wanting to share.
Yeah.
So, you know, the demand for a HMO business or HMOs in general did dip slightly.
Yeah. Climb.
Also, people, you know, in the shared accommodation were some of the hardest hit people through the pandemic because they're in that frontline services like customer service, you know, the theatre industries, entertainment, etc.
Yeah.
And naturally, people just don't want to share in the pandemic. So
in regards to now, how many properties do you actually own, and how many do you own outright?
So I don't own any properties outright.
Yeah.
Reason being is I would never really want to own a property outright because
Start the other way. So
I'll start this way and then go
Yeah.
okay and this way. Yeah, I would never really want to own a property outright. Reason being is like London property prices we're averaging about 450,000. With prices averaging 450,000.
Yeah.
450,000 pounds being in a property. It sounds great. You own a property.
Yeah.
But what's that money doing for you?
Yeah.
It's not working. It's not making you any money apart from your income, which you can make anyway.
Yeah.
So the way I would look at something like that is, if I could have 450,000 pounds in a property and I'm renting that property out for 1,300 pounds a month.
Yeah.
If I go and get a mortgage on that property for 75% of the loan to value, which is your typical buy to let amount, I'm now going to release 325,000 pounds. In my mind, that I've had to pay interest on that property of maybe 800, 900 pounds a month. So 12,000 pounds a year, let's just say, just to round it up. Can I make more than 12,000 pounds off 335,000 in a year? And that's the way I look at money. That, you know, I'd rather have the money now to make money off because I believe in my ability to invest. If I was somebody who was just very passive, just said, okay, you know what, I just want my returns, I don't want any stress, and I would get owning properties outright. But for me, that's not really a goal of mine.
When we were talking to was it Moise last time, the first property, he was saying something similar. He'd got that when he was, so not too long after we left college, when he was 21, and I think he said he took out money from the property to get into doing
And it's all about, because if I was to leave all the money in my first property, when you ask like how many properties do I own, I'd probably still only own that one because all my efforts would be going into paying back that one property. Whereas that's the great thing about property, and that the fact that, you know, long term, when we look at it outwardly, London wise prices have only gone up. There'll be little dips here and there for a month, maybe a year at times, but generally speaking they go up. So people often say, oh, when's the best time to buy? And for me, the best time to buy is always now. Like, just buy now and buy smart, and long term, you know, whether or not it's going to go up. And it's the kind of the principle of emptying a bucket. Like, you know, you go, you take all the money out you can, and you just leave that property sitting there giving you income. In 3-4 years time, you just go and have a look in the bucket. You see, oh, I've got some equity in it. Let me take it out and go and buy another property.